Welcome to Brazil Bound here on MLSsoccer.com. We are just 7 months away from the World Cup, and with just a few games before the World Cup roster announcement, every game counts. And it starts with this Friday's match against Scotland. What's at stake for this one? Well, let's bring in Simon Borg for more on that. And Simon, maybe the question is, for who is the most at stake in this match?
Well, Jason, I think the obvious one is Breck Shea. Although he's not getting time with his club team, I still think he's valuable to Jurgen Klinsmann and the national team because physically and technically he offers a package that can cause damage coming off the bench. He proved it at the Gold Cup. I think if he does it again in these two friendlies, I think he has a great chance to make the roster in Brazil. Then there's Sasha Kljestan, a player who is yet to make a big difference, whether he's starting or coming off the bench for me, and he's had plenty of opportunities. To me, this is his last one. Then lastly, Chris Wondolowski. He has an uphill battle given the emergence of Aron Johansson, but I think he's playing for a spot as an injury replacement. Something goes wrong. And now, he's a player who's playing with an injury of his own right now, a reported broken foot that needs surgery at some point in the offseason, but he's gutting through it.
All right, speaking of that forward crop, Chris Wondolowski is there. Clint Dempsey is not. Landon Donovan is not. And of course, Herculez Gomez has been struggling with injury for a while. So Simon, I have to ask you, what do you expect Jurgen Klinsmann to do with this crop? What does he need to do?
Well, now that Dempsey's out, and I think everyone assumes Dempsey-Altidore is the starting pair up top for the U.S. So now Dempsey's out, you kind of exercise your emergency situation here. I think emergency situation is Eddie Johnson and Josie Altidore. They've seen time together. I think a little more time wouldn't hurt. And then there's Aron Johansson and Josie Altidore. Johansson has only had one start, and him and Altidore weren't that effective against Jamaica. I think they could use another start in one of these two games. Lastly, maybe Mikel Diskerud is the better Clint Dempsey replacement. We saw him in that support forward role, which Dempsey plays, and I think he can be effective there.
All right, for more on Mix Diskerud and his role with the national team, let's head out to the West Coast and Matt Doyle.
One of the ongoing questions for Jurgen Klinsmann is just how to use Mix Diskerud. We've seen him play as a true number 10 in a 4-2-3-1 in the middle of that three line, just underneath a target striker. But that's not a formation the U.S. plays a whole bunch these days. We've also seen a little bit of him as a box-to-box midfielder in a 4-4-2, either alongside Michael Bradley or Jermaine Jones type. It's asked a little too much of him defensively. Well, Diskerud's abilities as a playmaker are unquestioned. We saw that against Mexico. But his abilities as a box-to-box midfielder, his ability to contribute on the defensive side of the ball at the international level, that's still up in the air. If Jurgen Klinsmann can get an affirmative answer on that over these next two games, it will have been a successful trip no matter what the results are.
Mix Diskerud is one of the most promising young talents in the U.S. system, and some may argue so is Nottingham Forest fullback Eric Lehigh, who fans have been clamoring to see for a while now. Well, he finally gets the call. But is he a real threat to challenge Brad Evans for that right back position? Here's Greg Lawless with more on Evans' hold on that spot.
What more does Brad Evans have to prove? Everything. And nothing. Everything, because unless you're Tim Howard or Clint Dempsey, playing for the U.S. national team is always a trial of sorts. A relative newbie like Brad Evans is in a constant state of proving himself. And nothing, because Brad Evans has shown in his 9 caps this year that he can hold his own. Truth be told, statistically, he lags behind the other regular outside backs. He's last in passing accuracy, last in passing in the final third, and last in chances created. But statistics never tell the whole story. Brad Evans is making a strong case to be the U.S. men's national team's starting right back next summer in Brazil, and here are 3 reasons why. 1, he's got an engine that never runs out of gas. Stamina is of paramount importance at the World Cup. 2, although he's not a speedster, he makes up for it with his speed of thought and tactical awareness. If he starts against Scotland and Austria, watch how often he tucks in to help the center backs. And 3, nerves of steel. He simply does not seem flustered by anything. And what coach would not want a guy like that on his squad?
Well, Simon, a lot of people could make arguments for or against Brad Evans at that right back position. Yeah. Let me ask you, do you think he's inked into Jurgen Klinsmann's lineup?
I'd have to say penciled in, Jason, especially based on what Greg told us. Look, I think there's still a chance Fabian Johnson could shift over and play right back for the U.S. Then there's DeAndre Yedlin of the Seattle Sounders, who, if he shows up in January camp, I think he could impress. Then there's Steve Cherundolo. I believe what many do, that if he has a healthy stretch of months there and shows up at World Cup camp, I think if he's still standing by then, he very well could start in Brazil. And then lastly, Timmy Chandler. Look, he's been out of the picture almost for a year, so I think he is the longest shot. But there's still plenty of options.
All right, so I'm going to ask you a couple more questions, including this one. When the U.S. last played Scotland, it was a blowout in Florida. Is this the team they want to be playing now as they prepare for the World Cup?
Well, Jason, I think Scotland is on a very inferior level, both tactically and technically, to what the U.S. is going to see in Brazil. So I'm not sure what you get out of it. The saving grace here is you're playing away from home, Hampton Park, one of the toughest places to play. So that hostile atmosphere could really test the U.S. But then the real test is Austria. A few days later, they are at a very high level, unlucky not to be in the World Cup playoffs. But look, I hope this is it with the European teams, because look, the U.S. has played 30 games against CONCACAF teams during the Klinsmann era, 9 against European teams, and only 3 against South America. And you have a 50% chance you're getting a South American seed in the group stage. And plus, the European match, if you face a European team, is you're least likely to win that. Where are the African teams? Where are the Asian teams? They faced 0 of each. And those are the games you have to win.
All right, Simon, one more question. Looking at the U.S.'s biggest rival, who these days are going the extra mile, or should I say extra 7,000 miles to try to qualify for the World Cup, Mexico got it done with a 5-1 victory over New Zealand. Give me one sentence on what you expect from the next leg.
They're going on vacation to New Zealand because they are booking their trips to Brazil.
Thanks, Simon. We'll get back to him in a moment. For now, we return focus to the U.S. team, and Scotland is next. Friday, 3 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN2 and Unimas, and Austria is Tuesday, 2:45 p.m. Eastern Time on NBCSN and Unimas. Now let's get to some predictions for these games. How about we do it Brady Bunch style? Simon, Matt, Greg, who you got?
Well, Jason, for me, I think the U.S. finds space against Scotland, and they beat the Scots 3-1. But against Austria, Austria are a better team than the U.S. Austria shuts them out 2-0.
I think the U.S. goes on the road to Old Europe and gets a couple of big wins. It'll be 3-1 to the Yanks in Scotland, then they'll cross the Alps and get a 3-2 win against Austria.
Well, I say 2-1 U.S. in Glasgow. I think the U.S. are too talented for Scotland. And 1-1 in Austria. I think the U.S. will be a little tired. It's a good Austrian team, too.
I think the tough test will come in the second game, but Scotland gives them a fight. 2-1 against Scotland. The U.S. wins it. Then in Austria, I think the U.S. draw 2-2. They would be happy to finish unbeaten in these 2 games. That's all we have for this episode. We'll be back to sift through all the takeaways from these matches when Brazil Bound returns on Thursday of next week. See you then.